Hey everybody, this is Dr. Tim Peck, co-founder of Project Next Media, where we are taking the fear and hate out of Indiana, Midwest, and all of America. We had a special guest today who is David Pepper. He was the chair of the Ohio Democratic Party for the Democrats. He was and is a prolific author, at least 8 books that I know of, and currently the author of 2 pretty amazing books, Laboratories of Autocracy and How Do We Save Democracy? So, David Pepper, good to see you. Thanks for coming on the show. Please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Thank you. I'm excited to be with you. Excited to see you in person just a few weeks ago in Bloomington. I'm born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, which means around here we call it the tri-state, which does include Indiana.
It sure does.
Not to sound like Sarah Palin, but from here I'm looking at Kentucky. I can see it from my house, well, from my office building. So I'm looking over the Ohio River at about 15 miles behind me is the border into Indiana. And so I was a city council member, a county commissioner here, and we have Hamilton County here, and then ran statewide twice, attorney general and auditor. Became party chair for 5 years. Got to know actually a lot of Hoosiers through that role, and then after that, started writing books about. And my sad assumption is you could write the same book there about the disintegration of sort of the middle and democracy due to highly gerrymandered state houses. I called it Laboratories of Autocracy, as you mentioned. I kind of based it on Ohio, but it's really the story of a lot of our states, where states that were known for being somewhat in the middle not that long ago, like Indiana, even voted for Obama, Ohio as well, have been going through this downward spiral, and I've been kind of talking about that ever since. It's sadly sort of a preview of what's happening nationally, where we stop seeing real notions of democracy or even choice in elections, and we start to also see a breakdown of the rule of law. So my goal in life is to not only point all that out, but show how we can get out of it. And I'd love to talk to you. Another big thing, I have an 11 and 8-year-old boy. We are massive Pacers fans. We drove that drive to Indy back and forth long before anyone else. We've been doing that drive for 3 years. We were cheering for McConnell and all the others long before it got cool. So we are major league base. My wife. So we went to enough playoff games. I've got like 6 yellow Pacers shirts, and my wife's like, "David, what are you going to do with all these Pacers shirts?" So we are true Pacers fans.
Are you a Reds fan too? Or are they going to overtake
Huge Reds? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Bengals and Reds are my first love, but I like the Cavaliers. But for us, the Pacers are only 100 miles away.
Yeah.
So we would, after school, get in the car and go to a Friday game or others. So Reds, Bengals, most things Ohio, and I like the Cavaliers, like I said. But I mean, no one was more heartbroken than when Halliburton went down than my kids.
Yeah.
So we are Major League Pacers fans.
Well, the tri-state area, most of our viewers, about 60-65% of them are from the tri-state area. They're in the Kentuckiana, Ohio.
Oh, really? Oh, good.
Area. Yeah. And so,
great.
And then beyond that is Indiana. And then beyond that are people from all around the country. So I like to say to people, what makes the culture the same in the tri-state area is that we eat peanut butter sandwiches with our chili, which is not something that really happens in the rest of the country. So,
by the way, I went to school out east, and I was in Connecticut, and they talk about the tri-state. I think it was like Connecticut, New Jersey, New York. I'd be like, that's not the tri-state. It's Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana. Get it straight.
Yeah, I've been there and lived there and went to school there. So, so great. I mean, you have 2 amazing books. You have 8 amazing books. I've read these 2, Saving Democracy and Laboratories of Autocracy. And I would love to get into the theories there, but I want to do it through the eyes of what people here in Indiana are looking at, and it seems the whole country is looking at. We've got ourselves caught up in is this gerrymandering, and it's blatant, mid-census gerrymandering. And so people are like, this is blatant. This is obviously voter suppression. But the question is voter suppression real? Outside of this blatantness, right? Is this the first time many people are seeing it, or has it been going on?
Yeah. Gerrymandering is a form of voter suppression, but there are also many other forms. And I teach voting rights and election law. And sadly, the voter suppression we've seen since about 2011 entirely coming out of state houses is part of a long national pattern of sort of a back and forth. We've had a great opening up of voting, marked by things like the Voting Rights Act, or after the Civil War, massive amounts of registration, the amendments, and then shortly thereafter there is a backsliding, and it comes in this. It almost repeats itself. The types of devices used, that add costs to voting, add inconvenience, knock certain people off the rolls through all sorts of, again, in the late 1800s, it was sort of literacy tests that were designed so some would fail and others were given a waiver. Now it's all sorts of new hoops. It's very real. It doesn't always change outcomes, but it affects the electorate enough that in close races it certainly does.
Yeah.
And we've seen a combination of things that's led to it. 2011, there was a response to Obama winning in a lot of states that the Obama coalition was a threat. And so a lot of things were done in states like Ohio, that's where I wrote this book, and Indiana and other places that disproportionately impacted the Obama coalition. And then we also saw a Supreme Court get more conservative, hollow out the Voting Rights Act. So laws that would have been impossible to pass or would have faced real legal challenges only a few years later are okay. And that
Right.
especially has changed the story in the southern states. So we've seen in the recent years real data that the number, and sometimes it gets covered as this is only about messaging or brand. We've seen exactly what you would predict for voter suppression that's targeted in the ways I'm talking about, a real decline
Hmm.
in especially minority registration and voting, and an increase in sort of Republican voting. And so there's some of that reflects, party messaging and brand, but a lot of it reflects exactly what you'd expect after years of pretty consistent voter suppression in a
Sure.
court that's allowed it to happen.
Yeah. So here in Indiana, I'm not sure how familiar you are with our laws. We have a number of ways of voter suppression, and I liken it to a frog in boiling water. Right. This
Yeah,
has just slowly been added on one after another, and it feels like this is normal. This is how it's supposed to
yeah,
be, where
yeah,
you have a state that votes pretty much 60-40 in a statewide election, yet the representation in our state house is a supermajority for the Republicans. That doesn't kind of
yeah.
add up, and so there's gerrymandering in the state Senate and state House. But there's also other things. We have straight party ticket voting. We're only one of 6 states that have
I
that.
yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and we, in terms of removing people from the voter rolls, and then there's a lot of people showing up to the wrong polling place because they weren't told, or they weren't told forcefully enough that you can't go to this one. The school that you went to for 30 years has now changed. You have to go across town. And then one of the big ones I find really egregious, not just Indiana, I believe it's 17 states that have this. You can't register to vote within 30 days of the election, which
Right,
means the time that most of America is paying attention to an election, you can't register to vote, right? And there's
right,
something like 25 or so states that have same day
yeah,
registration, right? That's a
right. Without
complete
any problems, without any problems. Yeah,
right, without any problems, with no voter
yeah.
fraud or anything going on like that. So these are just some of the ways. But okay, so let's get into it. It's completely blatant right now what's happening in Texas.
Hmm.
It's blatant what Indiana's discussing, and it's blatant in California too. So
Yeah.
what's happening with gerrymandering?
Sure, and it's coming to Ohio. I mean, Indiana and Ohio, I think at least will both have 2 seats that they will try and steal without an election, but by drawing the maps. Um, so the way I think about it in 2 ways. One is this is very much similar to. So take a step back to what you just said: a frog in boiling water. If we saw what was happening in states like Ohio and Indiana or Texas in another country, we would literally see it clearly. Oh, this is just an attack on democracy. This is not
Right.
normal. This is if Viktor Orban were to change the map so that a Congress in Hungary that would have flipped no longer flips, we'd say, well, that's just sort of an autocratic action.
Yeah.
But here in America, because we sort of believe in democracy, we're almost so up close to it, everything's partisan. we treat it differently as we would see it clearly somewhere else. And the other way to look at it, to see that it's not, this is not just the normal gerrymandering that we see in 20 and 21, as bad as that is. The mid-decade is a different matter entirely. And the way I said this when I was in Bloomington the other day, and it was J.D. Vance's trip to York State Capitol that really made it clear to me. This is very analogous to the buildup to January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump had lost the presidency in November of 2020. He knew it. He told people it. But he wanted to undo the result that would knock him out of power. So what did he do? He called up the Michigan state legislature and Pennsylvania and Arizona and Georgia, and he simply tried to undo the Electoral College loss by getting state houses to do his bidding.
Yeah.
And this is the same thing. It's just in advance of the loss they're worried about and not after. And so when they're calling Texas, they're very clear about at this point, Indiana, Missouri, Ohio, and Florida to change the maps so that a congressional loss that they worry is coming, and they should be worried given all they're doing, they simply undo it in advance. So it's very much sort of a January 6th style attack on democracy. It's an attack on an election outcome.
Right.
That would knock them out of power. It just happens to be change everything in advance so you don't lose. And again, this is very similar to what Viktor Orban has done to get in power in Hungary permanently. Mess
So
with
what?
the rules, etc. So that's what it is, and we should be fighting back, seeing it that way, as opposed to your traditional gerrymandering, which we need to fight back too. But this is a different level entirely of sort of election interference in advance.
Yeah. And so the argument that we've seen from the right is, Democrats have been doing it. Look at Illinois. Look at Massachusetts has 9 out of 9 Democrats representing them. Aren't there any Republicans there? California's already gerrymandered. What, are you going to gerrymander it more? What do you say to that when that argument comes your way?
Well, the first thing I say is I don't like gerrymandering anywhere. I want to get rid of it. And if we want to get into a battle of who wants to get rid of gerrymandering more, this is not a close contest. States like California and New York have on their own created independent districting commissions.
Yeah.
The maps are a result of those processes. Michigan, same thing. Arizona, same thing. So to stick places like Ohio in the same category as California is just not accurate. California has an independent districting commission that draws those maps. That's what California's opted to do. New York does the same thing. There was a bill in 2021 in Congress to end gerrymandering on a federal level. Every Democrat voted for it. Every Republican opposed it. Republicans filibustered it in the Senate and killed it. So let's be very clear about who's trying to end it. But yes, we should end it everywhere. Why? Because it leads to bad government everywhere. I don't care where you are. Any system, and this is what I say to Republicans and Democrats, all of us should be against it. Any system where most, if not all, the elected officials are guaranteed re-election will be bad government. And it will be unrepresentative, and it creates incentives for extremism and corruption. So yes, let's get rid of it everywhere. In the meantime, though, those Republicans who say, well, what about Democrats doing it? Call your Republican members of the House and tell them that you believe that you hope, and I hope it comes up in the next couple of weeks, that you want them to vote for the bill to end it. And one other thing, the Supreme Court of the United States, it ruled that it could do nothing about gerrymandering of 5 years ago. Really bad decision. Every Democratic attorney general went to the Supreme Court and said, please end gerrymandering. And every Republican attorney general went to the Supreme Court and said, don't do anything about it. So this after the fact pointing at Illinois is just not in good faith. That's gaslighting. But one other terrible example, in Ohio, where we have the worst gerrymandering, it's unconstitutional. We tried, not just Democrats, but a bipartisan coalition tried to end gerrymandering last November and create an independent districting commission. And it would have ended gerrymandering for anyone, Democrats, Republicans doing it here. Mike Johnson came to Ohio and campaigned to kill our effort to end gerrymandering here. And now he's using this Congress to do the gerrymandering. So I agree that everyone should be out of the business. It's bad government. I would love to find more Republican allies who will agree that we should end it in every state all at once, and that
Sure.
would finally take care of this poison to
Yeah.
American politics.
I love this point and haven't quite heard it. I'm sitting here saying, if I'm elected to Congress, I will be ending gerrymandering, right? And Amy Klobuchar had a bill last year that got buried around ending mid-district or mid-census gerrymandering, and it got buried.
Yeah.
But calling your representative to say, I want you to stop gerrymandering in Illinois when you're in a red state is a very interesting way about going about it, right? I want you to stop gerrymandering everywhere, but stop it in these blue states too.
But hey, let me be clear though. I think in the short term, I don't think Gavin Newsom and others have had any choice. I mean, they're trying to steal the 2026 majority. So in the short term, I think that there's no choice but to fight fire with fire. But never lose sight of the North Star that rather than having gerrymandering everywhere, we want it nowhere. And so even if certain governors are having to play this defense, I think that we should also be the same people saying, but we want everyone to vote against it everywhere. We want the Supreme Court to rule it unconstitutional everywhere. And I think we have to do that at the same time because I don't want a world where every single state's gerrymandered. I think that's bad for everybody.
So let's talk about defense and offense because it's something that you talk about in your books and use this analogy of, Republicans are on the offense in many ways, but not only are they on the offense, they're playing a different game sometimes and thinking about what it looks like to fight in the 3 years that aren't a presidential election, where Democrats are often looking at that big, shiny goal. Can you say more about that and your thoughts there? I think they're fascinating.
Yeah. And my guess is when I say this, people in Indiana and other states will say, yeah, I've been saying this for years. But my goal is to try and sort of wake up everyone, including people who haven't seen it. They are playing a different, deeper democracy battle than we have. They understood the Koch brothers, Karl Rove, Alec, that the way it goes back to what happened with Jim Crow too. That wasn't the result of federal legislation. That was the result of states crushing democracy because states have levers of power over democracy, voter suppression, districting, and states control every issue we care about too, public schools, universities, you name it. And so one side has been I call it the two battles of a soccer field. One side is on offense. And their offense is always winning state houses and then doing most of the damage through state houses. And that's how they have played the game. And they play it in every state they can. They play it in every year there's an election. And once they win, they gerrymander that state house, they suppress the vote on their side, and then they put into place all sorts of policies that we know are unpopular, that would never survive in a fair democracy with fair districts. That's been the sort of pro-autocracy side, if we can call them that. I'm trying to look up the picture of my book. I'm going to show it to you. What's the side that's been for democracy been doing? We have largely thought none of that matters. And if all we do is win a few federal elections so we have control of the House, Senate, presidency, we're fine. We win. And that's why when Obama won and we won the House and Senate, we celebrated like we had won the whole thing.
Right.
And when Biden won in 20 and we won the Georgia Senate seats, we celebrated like, oh, everything was won. But it wasn't because they were still in control of state houses. And so very quickly, forget January 6th even, very quickly after Biden won, if you were paying attention, it was obvious that they were still on the march crushing democracy in all the states they controlled, and we didn't gain a single state house that year. So what I try and use the analogy of my own kids is if one side is literally on offense all the time in state houses, and the other side only is battling in 5 or 6 states at the federal level, largely ignoring state houses, and we celebrate those wins while they're celebrating all the state houses wins, who's going to win that battle? They are. They are controlling democracy at its roots. They are fighting against it everywhere. If they win the federal stuff, even more power they acquire. But they are always on offense, and we're seeing that, again, even when we won in 20, but they still control the state houses, they still ground away at gerrymandering and voter suppression, and they make it, and just to be clear, most of the damage they are doing to America, forget democracy, but on substantive matters, is through those state houses. That's where Dobbs came from. That's where voter suppression comes from. That's where they're crushing public schools with vouchers. So if they're doing all their damage there, we got to get on offense there as well. And if we don't, they're going to keep winning, even if we happen to win federal offices. So that's sort of the broader theory of these books. But I know I've talked for a while. The good news about all that is it means, like you're doing in Indiana, there's so much more we can do when it comes to democracy than hoping that we win a Senate race 500 miles away. We can fight back in the very places we live, including in red areas.
Yeah. So one of the interesting, so you said a lot of interesting things in there, but one piece of it was the Republican platform is not popular. And so I think that's relatively self-explanatory and obvious, and please say a few more words on it. But what about the Democratic platform? What if you're so if we did the same thing that the Republicans did and tried to fight for these state houses in a dirty way,
right,
and had our policies be out there, would they be popular? And before you answer that, I want to show you something that I read Fox News newsletter every morning. I also read far right stuff every morning, which is sometimes I need a mental break. But this is from a couple days ago, and I'll explain what I'm seeing because not everyone is watching. Some people are listening on the radio here. It's a donkey in a suit sinking on a boat that says D on it for Democrats, with a big vote for us from the donkey. And then the donkey says, where for men and women's sports, open borders, more inflation, soft on crime, more abortions, taxes on tips and overtime, foreign wars, no free speech, trans surgery for children, and it's sinking. You know, this is how the Republicans have kind of said, okay, yeah, we're doing bad stuff ourselves, but the stuff that the Democrats are saying is not popular either. You know, how do you combat this rhetoric? Yeah.
The answer to that is, can we take that slide off, because I even don't want to look at it.
It's hard, right? It's hard.
Yeah, the answer is, this is why we campaign in a different way than they campaign. Forget how they characterize the issues or how we characterize the issues. Just think about the issues. They cut Medicaid, we support it. 2/3 of America agrees with us. We support public schools, they are using private vouchers. Every referendum to lead to vouchers has failed because people support public schools. We wanted broader access to health care with the Affordable Care Act, they didn't. Forget name calling. The American people agree with this. We want common sense gun reform, they don't. That's 80-20. The truth is, if we run on the core beliefs we have, and they are not successful in changing the subject into issues that they exaggerate or make up or whatever, we are with the majority. Do something, reproductive freedom versus abortion bans, no exceptions. 70% or 60%, my guess is at least mid-50s in Indiana.
It's mid-70s.
Agree with us.
Mid-70s.
So the point is, the answer is they gerrymander because they know this. They put that photo up because they know it. They have to change. They come up with a caravan coming from Mexico in October of every 4 years because they don't want a referendum on cutting Medicaid or on raising wages, now including costs and tariffs. So the truth is, they gerrymander because they know this. They change the subject because they know it. And the heart of our campaigns, literally, if they were basically about our core beliefs, and that was the referendum a campaign was on in a fair district, we would be winning everywhere. Yep. And that's the thing to remember. And so their battle, just to keep this in mind, they know this. Mitch McConnell, when Lindsey Graham post-Dobbs said, hey, I want to have a bill in the Senate to ban abortion, Mitch McConnell said, no, we don't want that because we'll lose. This is what shapes everything from gerrymandering to disinformation to doing, here's the most important one. What did Mitch McConnell probably say to Lindsey Graham? Hey, Lindsey, we don't want a Senate vote on this because then our candidates will lose. We'll just do it through state house bans. It's why most of the things they want to do that are quite unpopular largely get done through state houses. public school vouchers, for example, unpopular once people see what they do. So just remember that they know that their views are unpopular, and that is why they must gerrymander. That is why, literally, in many ways, the core of everything they do flows from the fact that they do gerrymander. That way, they can't be held accountable for extremism that is totally out of touch with even their voters. And what we have to do is fight for fair districts and then be more effective communicators, because once people hear that we're the ones for Social Security, strong Medicaid, better health access, higher wages, public schools, reproductive freedom, and the like, the truth is those will all win you elections if that's what the voters are actually thinking about when they vote.
Yeah, I think this piece about abortion is really interesting for last election. As someone who was running for office, we try to keep issues local because that's what's important to voters. Even federal issues, how do you localize them? Yet we got carried away with something that we're very passionate about, which was abortion. And I myself, so passionate about it and really leaned into it. And people cared about that in Indiana, women, men, etc. But on the Republican side, they did some genius messaging around send it back to the states, right? And so people bought that and said, sure, like let's do this at a state level, not a federal level. Of course, this is a state right. But again, especially people in blue states don't necessarily understand what's happening in states like Indiana, where the voter suppression is so bad that of course that's a winning strategy for the Republicans. And not only is a winning strategy for the Republicans at the state level, but now it takes away our popular policy out of the federal picture, and now they're fighting in a different fight. So I just saw it, experienced it so much last year.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, the state frame helps them some, but still, like we all know, the only state that failed on these referenda was Florida because they had a 60% threshold. So even back in states, I mean, they are on very, very shaky ground when they're basically passing bans. And the reason gerrymandering matters so much to them is because things like abortion bans, no exceptions, are, 90-10. We had this infamous case where the young girl from Columbus was sent to Indiana for abortion care following a rape. Like 5% of Americans agree with how Ohio treated her.
Yeah.
And so if you had fair districts, and again, this is why they fight for gerrymandering, they know that they couldn't defend that in a district that was 60-40 Republican. It would be a losing issue. And that is why they are so addicted to gerrymandering. One of the worst parts about what's happening is the people that we're talking about now are in their second generation of office holders who've only known a world of extreme gerrymandering. So for the most part, we're talking about people, Mike Johnson included, they've never been in a real election in their lives. Like they are now scared to death of a swing voter or any election that isn't guaranteed advance because their own rise to power has never involved democracy or elections. And that's one reason I say this is, for your Republican listeners, this is a bad system for everybody. We don't want people in power pulling levers that raise property taxes, do extreme things that no one agrees with, undermine, everything from local policing to infrastructure, and then they don't destroy public schools. And in many rural parts of Indiana, how that's the school they have, and if you send the money vouchers, that school suffers. The fact that they can do all that and then never worry about a reelection is just bad for everybody, and the results follow declines in outcomes and basically every way you can measure it. So this is why gerrymandering is just bad across the board, and we should all be fighting to end it over time.
So something interesting happening in this tri-state area, and I want to know more about Ohio, but in Kentucky, public schools are revered. Public schools are, there's been a big vote to kind of save their public schools in many ways. In Indiana, public schools are revered by many, but the voting has been to enable the state house to enable voucher programs and take funding away from public schools and degrade a lot of what the public schools can do. I don't know what the situation is in Ohio at this moment. I'd love to know where that stands. But how did Kentucky be able to make sure that people knew that this is an issue that Democrats care about, that we need to protect, whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican?
Leadership messaging. Ohio is unfortunately, Ohio, Florida, and Arizona are probably the three worst examples of what happens to your state once you create universal vouchers. Indiana, Missouri, Tennessee, Texas are following. We're now at more than $1 billion a year. Most of it's going to families that were already at private schools. They could already afford private schools, while our state public schools are unconstitutionally underfunded. It's terrible. And once it starts, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle, but it's a disaster, and it's painful to see other states, including Indiana, even with all the clarity of how bad it is. And just to be clear, in Ohio, they demand all sorts of accountability for public schools and their public school meetings and their elections, as there should be. The private money is completely unaccounted for. We have no idea how the money is being spent. If, let's say, it's going to some for-profit company, which it does, we don't even know if it's going to education. There is zero accountability of the billions of dollars flowing. And some of the biggest scandals in Ohio in the last 20 years were, one in particular, a for-profit charter school took millions, and it was literally cooking the books about how many students it was accepting that it got paid for. It turns out they weren't even taking attendance. So it's been
Yeah.
a disaster. No one should follow this. How did and in Kentucky, and what happened in Kentucky isn't even unique. There has never been a referendum put to the people of a state
Yeah.
for vouchers that passed. Because once people see what the game is, which is essentially sending public money to private schools while public schools fall, in most states, 90% of the students are public school students. Most rural communities have no private school anywhere near them. Most private schools that are in larger cities are so expensive, the voucher doesn't cover the tuition anyway, so you have to be pretty well off to even benefit. Once people see that, these things are absolutely like attaching yourself to the Titanic. And to go back to Kentucky, Andy Bashir figured out how to talk about it.
Hmm.
Before the referendum, Andy Bashir's sort of MAGA opponent initially in that campaign embraced vouchers.
Hmm.
And Bashir was so clear about everything I just said. And the heart of it is that the heart of communities, especially rural, are the public school, the Friday night lights, all of it. Bashir embraced that. And he would not stop attacking his opponent for wanting to give away those dollars to private schools 100 miles away. By the end of the campaign, his opponent almost pretended he was never for vouchers. He
Hmm.
flipped the entire script. And
Yeah.
in debates, if you watch them, he would say to the moderator, Bashir, hey, ask my opponent if he's for sending money to private schools. And his opponent would literally try and escape the topic. And
Yeah.
so when this came up a year later as a referendum in the to create vouchers, in the same moment that Donald Trump won Kentucky like 2-1, the referendum failed in every single county of Kentucky, overwhelmingly 2-1 or worse. And the more rural and red and small the county, the worse it did. And
Yeah.
I went and traveled to the smallest county in Kentucky that voted for Trump 80-20. I asked those voters myself, hey, how come you think that did so bad in this county? They're like, well, we love our local school. Why do we want to send our money to some school 100 miles away? That doesn't make any sense for us. So I
Yeah.
actually think in Indiana, in Ohio, in Tennessee, in Texas, this is a potent issue. If it can be done in Kentucky through leadership, we have to do this everywhere. And Democrats, I think, need to be, including in Congress, need to be far more clear about their position on this than they've been in the past. This is not the old frame that vouchers are for, poorer kids to get a better chance. This is a giveaway largely to families that are doing very well to go to the same school they've always been to. That's the clear pattern in every state. Once they make it universal, it's really an indefensible and often leading to sort of corrupt policy.
And to double down on your point around state houses, once you get the supermajority, then you don't have to have those ballots go to the people to say, do you want public schools or
Yeah,
not? Right? And so that's what happens here in Indiana. They're just blocking it.
totally.
Never going to be
It
on the ballot.
if you had a fair district, interestingly, what happened in Texas is a real example of how gerrymandering does so much damage. A number of Texas Republicans, and maybe there's something like this in Indiana, to their credit, voted with Democrats to stop the effort to make vouchers in Texas happen.
Hmm.
because they knew we don't have any private schools here. Why would we give our money away from this district to, just like the folks in Kentucky told me? And what happened in the next round, because the only thing a gerrymandered world worries about is the next primary, the billionaires who love vouchers teamed up with Abbott, and they primaried all the people who had voted against vouchers, the Republicans. And not only did they primary them and spend millions against them, they ran ads. This is how much they know it's unpopular. The ads they ran made it look like those Texas Republicans had voted against public school funding. They literally made it about public school funding because they know, like this year's opponent figured out, undermining public schools in rural Texas or Ohio is a bad position. So they
Yeah.
not only primaried them, they put big money in, they misled them about what the vote was about, and then almost all of them lost. And
Yeah.
now these pro voucher Republicans did vote to put into place this very unpopular policy that other, I think more respectable Republicans who knew their districts knew and had stopped for years. So gerrymandering allows that to happen when it otherwise never would.
You're tying a knot for me of something I've been thinking about, which is why did the Republicans want Tom Tillis out of the race so badly in North Carolina after he voted against cutting Medicaid? Because he has so much better chance of winning that Senate race than who they're going to put into the primary versus, a moderate Democrat.
Right.
And so I'm like, but they're giving up the state by doing this. And I realized it's so damaging for him to be out there pounding about Medicaid being bad for the next 2 years and during the election. So
yeah, well, let's hope he does it anyway. But
yeah,
they, in the end, by doing what they're doing, I hate that they're doing it, but I do think, when I was with you in Bloomington, one of your, I met a candidate running for the state house in a very rural district. I said, "What are you running on?" She goes, "Medicaid cuts, high costs, and property taxes." Like,
yeah,
by embracing their extremism, they are giving us many more topics to talk about everywhere, not just where we think we can win, but everywhere
yeah.
that we haven't had issues on in the past. And they'd throw that iceberg photo at you, and that'd be in the campaign. But now we can talk about all these issues, and they're getting rid of the very people that were telling them, "Hey, getting rid of Medicaid is just bad politics." So now they own all that, and we get to run on all those issues everywhere, not just in places that are more likely to be blue.
So we have about 7 minutes here. What should we do kind of immediately after this podcast to save democracy? What should the listeners do? And can you also speak to what should Republicans do? This is not just even the title of your book, Saving Democracy. I think it's the byline is what Americans should do to save democracy.
Yeah. So my goal is, I think there's and some won't agree with this, but I've seen in Ohio, there is a broader multi-partisan coalition for democracy, and that's who I try and speak to. Obviously, I was a Democratic chair. I've been a candidate. But in Ohio, one reason we succeeded in stopping an attack on our democracy several times in 2023 was we had Republican officials and Democratic officials come together and say, "No, you're not going to ruin our referendum, mechanism. We're not going to let that happen." Our gerrymandering, our anti-gerrymandering amendments that did pass were bipartisan. So I do think there is still, if we're smart about it, and in states like ours, we have to build this, if at all possible, a multi-partisan coalition. What do we do? I mean, I think there's the more political thing, which is to make sure we're running everywhere,
Right.
to make sure we're fighting everywhere. I think I loved meeting some of your colleagues in Indiana who seem to be doing that. Virginia, classic case. Right now, Virginia Democrats are running in every single district for this November's election. I think that energy is going to vault them to, I think, a very big year, because they're not saying we avoid the rural part of Virginia. They're going and running on Medicaid schools. That's a really important thing. So to the extent wherever you are, you're part of the conversation. Do not let anyone convince anyone that the business as usual of leaving a lot of districts uncontested is acceptable. It's not. So that's one big one. And so if you have someone stepping up and running in tougher areas, be it federal or state, help them out. Don't think that the only way we're going to save democracy is that Sherrod Brown wins the Senate race in Ohio. We want that to happen. It's also the fact that we're starting to challenge people who have gotten away with bad behavior for years with no accountability and no one even running against them. Another big one, and there's a lot we could talk about, but another biggie right now, and it somewhat depends on the rules of your state, but that number that showed a big drop in voter registrations among Democrats is alarming.
Yeah.
And they are spending, as we talked about, they are purging so many voters in Ohio from the rolls that are disproportionately in cities. So, one thing I really recommend is think about your role in the world, the nonprofits you're involved with, the mayors or council members you know, whatever it is. There is so much more that can be done to interact and engage and register voters than we do. If they're going to spend all their time and all their money purging voters, we better be re-registering voters that are being purged. And this is
Yeah.
especially true in like in Bloomington, where I think you have Democrats in office, or you know, in Indianapolis, most of the purging of voters is happening in Democratic areas.
Yeah.
We have elected officials in those areas. Those elected officials should be using their power, not in a partisan way, but in a nonpartisan way to bring back into democracy constituents that are being eliminated from the rolls by all these steps and others. So I would say that wherever you are in America, um, using your footprint, and in my book, I go through tons of examples to try and convince people to get back into democracy. Do not be purged. Do not
Hmm.
be part of the 2.1 million who are no longer registered. And there's a lot of ways to do this beyond just political work. A lot of it, you know, if you're a nurse at a health clinic, maybe the health clinic could be registering everyone that shows up.
Yeah.
If you volunteer at a homeless shelter, give money to it. That homeless shelter could be registering people wherever you are. And this is nonpartisan work. It's pro-democracy work, and much of it, I think, is being left on the table and not done at a very moment where a decline in registration should alarm us. That's
Sure.
another biggie. Be a precinct executive too, by the way. One of the big lost opportunities in politics is the ground floor is precinct level organizing. We very rarely see a level of that activity that actually it takes to win. So join your local precinct and get involved there as well.
Yeah, and anyone in our area, if you want to get involved, be a precinct captain, we call them here in Indiana, or precinct chair, excuse me. Contact us and we'll help you get to the right place, whether you're Democrat or Republican. And then we will, if you're interested in someone's campaign, we'll help connect you to that too. And if no one's running in your area for state house or state senate, please listen to David Pepper here. It's so important that we show up and talk about what we believe in, and make sure that we're bringing a fight to the state house, not just the federal races. So, David, any last words? Thank you so much for being here. I've heard you speak now twice and met you twice. It's a bit inspirational when you do. It's so clear. This idea that we need to be fighting at the local level, and not just focusing on federal areas. Any last words that you have?
Just everyone, it can feel pretty dark at times. It felt that way after Trump won. I think August of 25 was especially a very, very hard month when it comes to democracy. But as you listen to us talk, know that it is a wake up call. But we're in the same battle for democracy we've always been in. In some ways, although it's sort of sobering to see that, we now are the inheritors of that long struggle that abolitionists, suffragists, civil rights leaders fought as well. In many ways, that makes everything we're talking about today more important. It makes our work, all of us individually, more meaningful than maybe we ever thought in our life that we would be serving such a high mission as sort of saving our democracy. And what I take inspiration from is knowing that as much as it feels hard, people before us went through a lot worse to get us to what we inherited.
Mm-hmm.
If they overcame what they overcame, where when neither party wanted them voting, or when they were faced with violence at every step, as much as what Trump is doing is awful, and JD Vance, I'm sorry, he's from Ohio every single day. If they overcame that to get us what we inherited, we can certainly keep going and overcome what we face. The only way you really lose your democracy in is if one side quits.
Yeah.
That's why we got Jim Crow. So there's no quitting. The country has always been dealing with this battle. We just happen to be the generation who's now in it. So just keep going forward. We've overcome these challenges before. We can do it again.
Yeah, this idea that voter suppression and gerrymandering is happening right now. It feels like an opportunity to me. It feels like an opportunity because of what you're saying, that the issues are on the side of the Progressive Party, right? So, if we get out there and vote, we win. It's that easy. And
Absolutely.
need to register people to do that. So thank you, David. Appreciate it. How do people find your books? How do people find you?
So my books you can find at Amazon.com. A lot of people don't like Amazon. BarnesandNoble.com. Go to an independent bookstore and order it. You can also follow me. I put a lot of this stuff online. My Substack is called Pepperspectives. Look up David Pepper. You'll find it. I provide a lot of excerpts there. And I'm pretty active, as you know, on Twitter and other things, just David Pepper. So all those places are places people can go to. I sort of have Beyond the Books an ongoing conversation like this through Substack. So follow me there if you're on Substack.
Great. Well, thank you so much for everything you're doing. Indiana needs you. Midwest needs you. The nation needs you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tim.